Michael was born on Port Royal Island, South Carolina, and as a child grew up on Marine Corps, Navy, and Army bases from coast to coast. After serving in the Army himself, he moved to Austin and attended the University of Texas. In the 80s, he co-founded and co-edited Aileron,
Yeah.
a literary journal, publishing the likes of David Weavil, Christopher Middleton, Daisy Edlin, and Charles Bukowski. It was at this time his own first book of poetry. Michael, how do I say that? Lyrika was published.
Lyrika.
Thank you. In 1989, he married and moved first to Taipei, then New York City, Iowa, and Hsin Chu, before returning to Austin in 1999, where he has since resided. In 2008, Dalton Publishing released Restless Astronomy, New and Selected Poems. He currently works at the University of Texas. Michael. Thank you for coming, Michael. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Yeah. So how's this whole Army, Navy, traveling around, being in the Army yourself, how has that affected your work?
I get restless. As a kid, I went to 10 different schools between kindergarten and senior high. I've been in Austin now 17 years. That's the longest I've ever been in one city at one time. But I have got to travel during that time. So that's always a feeder of the imagination.
You just got back from Scotland and Iceland, where you brought back like a ton of books with you.
Well, I was under the luggage limit, but barely. Yeah, I travel with old clothes so that, I wash them once and then I start to dispense with them as I traveled. And there was a guy in Stromness, which is in the Orkney Islands. I went to his bookstore and got real excited by the things that I saw and left and came back the next day, and he looked up at me because he's not used to tourists coming back twice. And I said, I threw some clothes away. I'm here to buy some more. So I was absolutely delighted. I somehow ended up back in America with an extra pair of socks, which, bad planning. I meant to abandon everything.
There's a poem that in your book, Restless Astronomy, and it's the longest title.
I will read that one for you.
Oh, good, because
Yeah.
I like that one. And so I won't talk about it. I'll let you read it.
Okay, you can do that.
I wanted to hear more about that poem and the making of that poem, but you can tell us.
Okay, I'll be glad to.
Well, I'm going to let you read. I kind of went over earlier, so I'm going to let you read. Are you reading from Restless Astronomy and your poems, or are you just from Restless Astronomy today? A.
Both.
Thank you, Michael.
Okay. Well, I started to plan what I was going to read today, but I didn't get very far. And thank goodness, where'd he go? Yeah, Rick actually was an editor for this when it came out, and we were tabs and, number 1, number 2, number 5, number 3, and he was just like, I'm just going to open my book and read some stuff. So it's a mixture of styles. I planned 2 poems, and actually I'm not going to read the second one. So anyway, we'll see how this goes. Oh, and originally when I put it forth to my publisher, my title was Platform Agnostic. Rick and Deltina were not really pleased with that title, but they sure were pleased when I changed the title. And now, though, it's truly platform agnostic because I'll read from the book, I'll read from some typescript, and there's actually a little thing I can write poems on the bus on the way to work. So, okay, that's queued up. Let's begin. You mentioned he reads slowly. I I take a Louis Armstrong approach, who actually played at the Driscoll Hotel decades ago, obviously. And somebody shouted up a standard at him, and the band said, slow or fast? And Louis turned and said, half fast. So with that in mind, and I'll start off in pagan times and take us up to the early 20th century here. Kind of like to travel both in space and time. So Achilles proposes to Isadora Duncan near Athens, 1903. Your smile is a ladder. I climb into your beauty. Earth waits by the curb, orbits idling. The sun dips in the sky like a fuel indicator. Let us flee on mythological heels. Let's outrace the lightning bolts thrown by that old man. Move through cumulus without effort. Not all histories stumble inconclusive, drunk over a curb on a moonless night. But hurry, we must escape this time and space, over mountains that loom, stubbed into the darkness like half-smoked cigars. Gather your energies, tighten your lips, lift up your arms, whirl if you must, the compass of a circle. I will stride, anxious with velocity beside you, hovering in the air between footfalls. And if you tire, I will bear you on golden armor, sun-bronzed muscles, taut carbon steel. Put that scarf aside. There's heat where we're going, and not a taxi in sight. That was kind of an inside thing. That's I don't know if you know, but that's how Isadora Duncan died. She got out of the taxi, threw her scarf behind her, and the taxi drove off and, well, strangled her. So be careful with scarves. Here's another nod to actually the late 19th century, so sorry I'm going back in time. Madame Pizarro's sewing. Your bent young form in the fading light, the coming storm rumbling in the hills. There exists an ambiguous mystical life within the stitched parameters you sew. And parallel to what there is at hand, I am as rent as lace caught on a button. Your healing patience works the thread, and whole again is that which once was not. Where'd you go, Francis? There you are. You didn't ask me how I started writing poetry.
How did you start writing poetry?
Well, I'm glad you asked me that question. It was actually ninth grade. I was a jock, and hey, you're ninth grade, you're a jock, you get lots of attention, and not so much, and I was pretty insecure, and I didn't know how to meet girls. But then I discovered, geez, some of them like poetry, and I was working on a poem in math class, which might account for why I'm not very good at math, actually. And I wrote a poem called Visions of Portia, and some kid grabbed it out of my hands and started reading it, and I didn't realize I was also a humorous poet at the time, but the guys were reading this Visions of Portia. They were looking at Portia, and she was knocked knees and, pipe stem legs, and, the Picasso eyes on one side of the nose, and that's what started. And then I found Mayakovsky. And so here's a nod to Mayakovsky. I always liked his line, "The clouded trousers. I go alone to weep at crossroads, crucified policemen." And that set me off on a survivalistic bend that is not over. So here's a short poem on the commissar of love's absence. The summer thunder rolls in the pre-dusk sky like wagons with potato wheels, gray, light, and ancient shroud. The moon would be full, if not for the overcast, its face pockmarked like Stalin without a nose. Okay, let's see. I'll skip my first trip to Ireland, and I'll get into some of the poems about living in Taiwan. I left Austin in '89. I met somebody I married, and they said, "Want to move to Taiwan?" I said, "Oh, okay." And here's a poem. The title is in Chinese, but I lost my notes, so I don't know what it means. So supply your own title. I have just flown in on my dragon, parked him by the curb. This time, I cannot accept no for an answer. You sit inside your house with curtains drawn. I am as patient as a Chinese monk. You have your priorities. I have my mountain poems. I guess that's a nod to Han Shang, because I used to read Gary Snyder, and he was really into Han Shang back in the 70s and 80s. So here's a narrative poem that Francois mentioned. I've worked in rare books libraries a lot, and I love 18th century books. They did not have catchy titles that would leap off the shelf at you. Their titles were just long. They would explain everything that you're about to be presented in a book, and I kind of like that. So here's the title. You can decide yourself. On Koshinga's Island, Japan's first colony, and though freed from Nipponese domination at the cessation of hostilities at the end of the Pacific War in 1945, nonetheless looking to Japan for pop culture influences over that of America, the Western barbarian receives a nickname not unapt or non-indicative, but humorous in some lights and thereby deserving. So there's the title, which is longer than some of my short poems. Kabu Shinshong lives in Hsinchu. In Hsinchu, say the travel guides, there is nothing of interest for the tourist. In this, the guides do not lie. Every morning he is awakened by music over the loudspeakers of the elementary school across the street, way down upon the Swanee River in Chinese, an unexpected delight. Not a delight is the moped repair shop downstairs, where invariably the first customer or two of the day has an engine problem requiring maximum revs of extended duration until there is such a haze of smoke that sound waves are impeded by the heavy pollution, and the engine, once again, sounds fine and cured to the human ear of mechanic and satisfied customer alike. Kabu Shinshong drinks his coffee and watches CNN. Dried sausage and bean paste and salted plums. He eats stoical pastries that would gag an Englishman. For the bus stop downtown is through a maze of alleys in which a small pack of scrawny, mangy dogs wander, feeding on garbage and rats, and though rarely aggressive, on occasion, bark because of his hair and beard, non-slanted eyes, and Western smell. He carries a walking stick in case of attack, but more than anything when it happens, the barking and the circling is a source of embarrassment. Everyone's staring. Look, the dogs are barking at the barbarian. The buses on this route are as old as hell. Dante himself was probably once a cursing driver. Kabu Shinshong always tries to sit halfway between the driver and the smokers at the back. The buses on this route have no air conditioning, so he hangs himself half out of a window, but not too far because the bus goes down alleys so narrow the smokers, to light their cigarettes, stick matches out the window and strike them on the walls of the buildings as they pass. A Taoist form of amusement for older men, it seems, as the younger males carry plastic lighters with photos of topless Western girls on the side. Once downtown, Kabu Shinshong descends the front exit stairs at a stop near the train station, ducks down an alley. The covered sidewalks crowded with new leaders at the Lucky Bowl Pasta Cafe, and gamers from the arcade that act Yakuza, but are really high school students who sneak too many matinees and thus are destined for vocational school, not college. Near the canal, walking by the Taoist temple across the street from Hootie's, which used to be a Hooters, but the Bureau of Weights and Weights and Measurements came by and determined the figures didn't add up. The sign out front was changed to Hootie's. The big round eyes on the owl, not quite as large as they were, yes, the impact of globalization and WTO standards. Kabu Shinshong turns and enters a 5-story building and descends a spiral staircase to Eslit in English, literally best quality in Chinese. A bookstore, one in a chain of 10 across the island, founded by a wealthy businessman with a love for books who has run the chain in the red for a decade. The Hsin Chu Eslit has 2 floors below ground level, a mezzanine overlooking a coffee shop where the waitresses speak English. If your demands do not exceed coffee and pie. Except for one waitress who has taken a Western Christian name, as all serious students of English do. Evelyn Waugh, a Hakka Xiaojia, literally Little Miss, who longs to study literature in Oxford. Balliol, or Old Miss, Oscar Wilde, and Bill Faulkner. It doesn't matter to her. her love of the language covering an ocean of difference, like an immigrant's tablecloth. She took Kabu Shinshan's order that first day. He was pleasantly surprised by her English, the quality of it, the accent that was a hybrid, Hong Kong colonial formality and down under Sydney Pringle. When she brought him a piece of pie, she nodded toward the portrait of Oliver Sacks hanging at the end of the stacks between psychology and philosophy. The people sitting near the art books want to know if you are him. Kabu Shinshan smiled and shook his head, no, no, remembering a cab ride in Nongong in which the driver said, all you Westerners look alike. It was his second visit to the cafe that confused him. No one waited on him. He could see Evelyn, who smiled, and two other waitresses. Only one table had customers. He shrugged inwardly to himself, stop being an impatient American. And he opened a book he thought he might buy, John Elster's Alternatives to Capitalism. Head down reading, suddenly a coffee cup appears within his vision, and looking up, Evelyn Waugh, beaming a smile, for you, she says. And in that moment he realizes for the next year, whenever he sits down at the Esley Cafe, he will not have to order, because they remember what he wants. And the irony is that it is not what he wants, but only what he wanted on that first visit, and he cannot change now. He wants no one to lose face or suffer embarrassment. Evelyn smiles. When she saw you, Mei Ling said, here comes Kabu Shinshan. That's beautiful, he said. What does it mean? And Evelyn Waugh, Chinese doppelganger of Myrna Loy, as she appeared in the Thin Man series, smiles and says, Mr. Cappuccino. Get questions, or did the poem answer all of them?
I just enjoy that.
Ding Hao. Okay, that's probably the longest poem I should read. Get through these. And let's go to some newer ones. The working title for this thing was called When You Wish Upon a Czar. It's divertimentos. Nothing too deep or heavy here. Although immediately we go back to Taiwan. This one's called In Taipei, after martial law. It is dusk at the little park near Xinglonglu, Luxingluko. Old men bring their songbirds and set the cages on benches and concrete ledges so the birds can visit one another and sing. And the old men sit, smoking long life cigarettes. Among themselves, there is no need to speak. Long Life was the brand of cigarettes Deng Xiaoping used to smoke them. He had to have them imported from Taiwan through Hong Kong since they didn't trade together at the time. He lived to be in his 90s, so it's kind of hard to argue with the brand. Okay. Oh, finally, a Japanese poem. Scorned basho at the gardening sale. Rain, disguised as dew, hides on the undersides of leaves. Your face comes to mind. A Fuji-color photograph snapped. Shortly after, your kisses stopped falling. It's amazing what having a medical emergency can do for you. It improves your vocabulary of anatomy. And I had, about a decade ago, had a brain tumor scare, and that's all it was. But whoa, you learn things. So, in her aspect and her grace, she was so beautiful. Every time she walked by, Van Gogh glued extra ears to his left temporal fossa. Got time for a couple more there, Francois?
Yeah, a couple more.
Oh, here's a cheerful one. Manuscript fragment recovered from the cadaver. Words skydive off the tips of our tongues, parachuting into glasses of wine. I heard the splash that time, did you? There are fewer days ahead than before. The surprise is how stealthy this little fact announces itself. promised to end on something truly cheerful. Oh, this was almost cheerful. Another dumbass tale from the heart of Texas. I worked a spotlight on one of the first stage productions, live music and performance, in a theater setting of Tommy. Waco, who would think, circa 1970 or 1. And after that, the youth director of the community theater deigned to do a Dickensian aqualung. But a board member's wife, slumming adulterously with a hippie TA at Baylor, learned on the sly and pointed out politely lyrics concerning leering at pretty panties in the park. The grand poobah lowered a grand hammered kibosh. Undaunted, the next grandiose vision, thus spake Zarathustra, Freddie's version, not Dick's. Cowboy booted ballerinas would sashay across the stage at the end of every act. But the youth director had to be hospitalized against his will due to an unspecified nervous disorder. Nothing fun ever happened in Waco again. Okay, how about 2 more? One to add. Happy man seeks pity, will travel. Here's the Cerulli conclusion. Cerulli was an Italian astronomer that pretty much proved it's like, okay, it's not canals, it's something else. And everybody went, oh, okay. But inspired by true events here, the Cerulli conclusion. Mid-morning bus, monologuing rider to passengers at large. The Martians are subterranean. The canals we see are collapsed tunnels, highways and byways, roofs of waterways. Their early engineers weren't as good as the Romans. That's why their stuff doesn't hold up. But till now, it's all the evidence we got. Now it's these robots we send, truly sniffing them out. Did you see the photograph of that belt buckle on a rock? That's one rodeo queen I don't want to meet. The thing is, we know they're out there now. And they knew we'd find out, and that's why they've already got spies here, right among us. Most in fast food restaurants and convenience stores where they get most of their intel. It's where most of us go. They don't want to bring down the government. It's the masses they're after. Bring down the masses by making them disappear. When the government's got nothing to do, it collapses under its own weight. But these calm, red-brained bastards didn't count on someone like me being so good at sniffing them out. I've reported over 200 to the authorities, but I can't do it alone. I can't remain invisible forever. The bus has stopped. The driver is halfway down the aisle. Sir, do you want to fight Martians or do you want to ride the bus today? Planet Earth's prime defender slouches down in his seat, knuckles the buckles on his stained rucksack. I think I'd like to ride. That's good. That's us. Where everybody wants to go. And sir, when I get you where you need to be, I know you'll protect us all. Now let's ride. One more. Short. I promise. I promise to do multi-platforms here, so I have to finish this one. This was in Scotland. Like I said, I love this little tool. I think you do too, Rick. It's just, and the typing is so hard. It slows you down. It really. Do I want to use that word? Nah, that's too much typing. So north by bus along the coast to Thurso. This is really far north of Scotland that you're traveling on. So the road's so close to the lapping waves of the North Sea, it would not be surprising to round a corner and be confronted by Norsemen from a beached dragon ship, cheering their good fortune at yet another strange metal tube disgorging occupants with gold and silver, not a mouth of them speaking Narn, every single one not a dagger or a sword upon them. I clutch my wallet while I nap. Okay, thank you.
Thank you guys so much. Thank you to Richard Cole. Thank you to Michael Gilmore. There's some books. You have 2 incredible, fun poets right here. You can buy their books and get them to sign their books for you, so please do. Also some refreshments, some cookies and some water. Thank you again so much for coming in for today. It was the first Multiverse. We'll be doing this every third Tuesday of the month. Or every fourth Tuesday, sorry, I got that wrong. Every fourth Tuesday.
Hey, where's the poets? Thank you, Francois.
Thanks, all.